In this episode, I speak to the lovely nutritionist Meg De Jong about how to eat for anxiety and what to eat for anxiety. We have a great discussion here, exploring all the different foods that we love to eat, our favorite snacks, lunches, breakfasts, and you're going to get so much inspiration and recipe ideas from just listening to the show. So if you ever find yourself feeling sort of not too excited about what to cook and confused about what snack to eat, this episode will give you some guidance that will really get that creativity going. We also discuss eating breakfast, intermittent fasting, what's the go for someone with anxiety, and really get into the nitty-gritty of the way you eat and how it influences anxiety. You're going to love this episode. It was so wonderful speaking with Meg. Okay, let's go to the show. Well, Megan, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
So the place I like to start for most of us is, what is it that you just wish that more women or people in general knew?
Love that question. I think, the first thing that came to mind as you were saying it, I'm just going to go off that because I think it's always best to go off your first instinct, is probably just this idea of self-love and self-nourishment, and the idea of, because I'm a nutritionist, I think this one came to mind, where it's like that idea of using food to really as a tool for self-love and nourishment for our bodies. And I wish that, it's a crazy world out there with diet culture and different things like that. And I just wish more women could really see food as this beautiful tool to nourish their body, nourish their mind, nourish their soul, and use that as like a way to really express love for themselves.
Yeah, 100%. And so often, right, we almost use food for the opposite reason. We turn food into the enemy.
Definitely. Yeah, it's really wild. And I definitely have had a history of doing that in my life. And so I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, because it's like you realize it's like, wow, food is actually this beautiful gift. And all this time I've been using it as a form of punishment, or I've not been actually just tapping into its like magic and its power. So
yeah, I totally agree with you. There's so much richness that we can unlock when we start to explore our relationship with food and see where that can take us. With that concept in mind around, using food as a self-love tool and the way that we can work with that, how did you come to this understanding in your own experience with anxiety, with nutrition? Take us back, Megan, to where you were at when you were just where you are now, helping people with food and anxiety was just a dream for you.
absolutely. You know what? I'll take you even a little further, where it was probably like a nightmare for me, where I
Right.
never,
Let's go
yeah,
to the rock bottom moment.
exactly. So I never would have imagined, many years ago, that I would be doing what I'm doing today. But I always say life is so funny that way, where sometimes
Totally.
we have these challenges to, teach us where we need to go. But yeah, for me, my journey with, nutrition actually really began at quite a young age. It was sort of just as I was entering high school. So I was 14. That's where in Canada we go to high school. Is that the same as you guys?
Yeah, we say
Yeah.
high school. Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. Yeah. So I was 14, and I actually started to develop a really bad eating disorder. And I realize now, it was just such a tool, or not a tool, but it was like this coping mechanism that I was, unknowingly doing. And yeah, it obviously brought up a lot of challenges, and it was a coping mechanism, because I was just like not happy in high school. And I didn't know, I realize now too, I'd struggled with anxiety for so much, like even in my childhood, but now, like, yeah, I just didn't realize it. And so
Mhm.
anyways, that was kind of where it all began. And for me, it was started going to my doctor and, trying to gain weight again, and understand my relationship with food, and, why I was doing this. But as a teenager, a little bit of a stubborn teenager, I would say, I was really resistant to any kind of form of treatment. And I actually hated nutrition. Like when anyone would try to talk about it to me, I was like, oh, I don't even want to hear it.
That's so interesting because you probably saw it. It's might feel the same as when someone says, just think positive and just be like, and it's like, oh, that's the last thing I want to do. And just like pretend like this is all fine and rainbows when it's not.
And you didn't see
Ex-
food that way as like your friend.
exactly. I would get so mad. Like my mom would try to have these conversations with me, my doctor, and like I just like it made me furious. And so then eventually, yeah, unfortunately, I just like my mom put me in therapy, and I would just sit in the therapist chair and cry, and I wouldn't say a word, and like it was pretty bad, to the point where eventually my doctor kind of said, like, look, if you're not going to do any form of treatment, like why don't you try anti-anxiety medication. So I, reluctantly went on it, because I was like, I still don't want to do anything, but I did go on it. And I think, in the short term, it definitely got me through my lowest time. But then about 4 years later, after I went to university, I decided, I realized, like, okay, I've actually seen quite a few side effects from this, that I didn't really know about. And I just
Mhm.
realized, when I was like young, I was so resistant to looking at my anxiety, and I think I'm actually ready now. So I decided to go off the anti-anxiety medication, and I was actually, like, at this point, really excited to explore, like, okay, why did I, why was all this happening, and what can I look at deeper, and what can this teach me, and how can I actually address this, and do this, and actually use food as my friend. I make it sound easy now, but of course, in the moment, it was like, this really, really challenging thing.
Well, Megan,
And
can I just ask you, what point
yeah.
there did you break through that resistance? Like, because it sounds like there was a really big wall there that you built up, which makes so much sense, because when we're kids, we just we need to belong, we need to fit in, we need to be accepted. And it's just such a deep yearning. We'll do anything for it, including starving ourselves or changing it, completely ruining our relationships with food and our body. And so you really it makes so much sense why you had this resistance and why you were like, no, because if I make friends with food, I will be, I'm not going to be accepted. I won't ever get that
Mm,
acceptance, something with those wires crossed. Does that make sense for where you were at?
absolutely. It
Yeah.
really does.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
you had all this resistance. What changed it for you? You said it was like noticing the side effects of the medication.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a huge part of it. And I just noticed things like I never actually changed my relationship to food, but my appetite kind of changed, and I gained a lot of weight. And I was tired all the time. And I just felt this, like looking back now, I can so pinpoint, like I felt this numbness. And like I even had like a couple teachers say, like, what changed in you? Like I think I was just kind of like really, I don't want to say dull, but it was kind of that sensation, or I almost like didn't care. And I think it like came across a bit like edgy, like not, I just like wasn't my sensitive self as much that I think people were used to seeing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was a big part. And then I studied kinesiology, which is kind of like, the study of the human body in university. So I think I was there, and I was like learning about all of our serotonin and dopamine, our neurotransmitters. I was like, wow, this is so fascinating. And I think it just like, it was a bit of a light bulb moment where I was like, okay, like there's stuff I can do to support my brain and to help my anxiety and things like that. So I was really excited to dig into what I could do beyond just the medication.
Yeah, beautiful. And so you're studying kinesiology, which, can you tell us a little bit more about what kinesiology is? Did you end up like finishing that course and everything?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have a bachelor's of kinesiology. I don't know. Do you guys have that study in? Yeah.
We
Okay.
do, we
Perfect.
do. I have a vague understanding of it, but I'm sure you could give everyone a much better one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So kinesiology is the technical term, I guess, is the study of the human body in motion. So you do a lot of anatomy, physiology, um, biomechanics, different things like that. We're really just nerding out about the human body, and yeah, really like learning how it works and how it moves and things like that. So from there, a lot of people would then go on to physiotherapy or occupational therapy. Some people want to go to med school. And for me, again, it was like I was kind of nearing the end of my undergrad studying, and I was like not exactly sure. I was like, okay, none of those paths really are calling my name. But then I'd met someone who went to nutrition school after, and I was like, I loved all of my electives in nutrition, and like we learned quite a bit about it in kinesiology, and I was like, okay, like I'm just going to give that a try. And I think subconsciously it was more just a decision I made, because I was like, I learned a lot about nutrition, but I still wouldn't say I had like a deep understanding about, the way food really worked for my body and mind. And I think I actually just saw it going to this, I went to the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. I saw it as another tool to really further my journey and my relationship with food and understanding how it works for me, and kind of like that healing journey, just taking it a step further.
And do you feel like were the people around you supportive of this approach? Like, did you, I feel like in Canada in general, like there's a more sense of like, let's explore alternatives and let's go into what else is there versus just let's say the conventional approach of just get on medication and go get therapy.
Right. Yeah, I do feel so. I did feel supported. And I think there still is a lot of that though in Canada, where it's like, yeah, just kind of like do the magic bullet method where, it's like, just try this one thing and it will fix it all. And, you realize it doesn't often work that way. So there was some openness, but I think there was, still some resistance to about being like, okay, well, like, what are you going to do? Like when you go off medication, what if you feel worse? And like all of this. And for me, it was just like a bit of like that inner knowing that I really had to tap into and be like, nope, I'm ready. And I feel like it was just like the right thing for me. And I do want to say, like, anyone who is on medication, and it's like, of course, like, it can play such a supportive role and there's no judgment. And I think it's really just comes down to like listening and like looking inward and knowing what it is the right time for you to do whatever choice you might make,
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's not about, go cold turkey on the medication, go full, holistic and just looking at nutrition. It's like everything can work together potentially, or different approaches are going to work for different circumstances, and medication can play a key role in helping someone to cope when you're just not coping, so that then you're actually able to think about food.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so you started to study in nutrition. Tell us about, what was that journey like for you, learning about food?
Yeah, it was such a beautiful journey. It was, so eye-opening, and I loved it. I think it was like when I like truly felt like, oh my gosh, like I love school, I love learning. Like I was like really lit up. And it was interesting because I had planned to go to this nutrition school. And like I said, it was kind of more of just this, like, I'm going to do this for myself, but I wasn't ready to say like, yeah, I want to be a nutritionist when I grow up, or, when when I'm done. I was kind of just like, I'm dipping my toe into this. And even then I remember telling my family like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this nutrition school, and I'll probably like go to another school after that, or like get my master's or whatever, PhD, or like, so I just like, I loved learning, And then I remember like my mom and my partner at the time, and my best friend, like they were all like, Megan, you love this. Like, what are you talking about going to a different school? Like, you need to do this and you need to like bring this to the world. And I think they saw the way it changed my own relationship with food. And and then I would, I did like these case studies and stuff, and you get to work with like kind of people around you, and everyone's like, wow, like these tips you gave me, like I feel so much better. And like it was like really cool to like get to see it, through my time in school, like how it was transforming my own life and other people's lives. And it really gave me that confidence to be like, okay, yeah, there is something here. Cause I don't know about you, Georgie, but like I feel like for me, like it took a while to really like believe that food was that powerful and that helpful.
I think we have so much conditioning in society to trust the magic pill over everything else. And so, we've obviously said what we've said about medication. It's not black or white. Again, we're always so careful when we talk about this topic. But I think there's a strong impulse to give all this weight and authority and power to the conventional approaches, and then kind of disregard, like, as though food is this weak little thing that's just like doesn't really matter. The only reason I think food hasn't been given so much power and authority in terms of, say, supporting people with their mental health is because it's really hard to study it. It's really like a medication. You can give one group of the medication and you can give one group nothing, and you can compare the effect. How do you test like diet and the way you eat? It's also varied. Like, is it the fact that one person was eating 5 oranges a day and one person had no fruit? And, like there's so many different things. We could all eat whole foods, but what does that mean? And we know it's sort of generally good. So it's really hard to study.
Absolutely. I know it's so true. And yeah, sometimes I'll like read, the limited studies that are kind of done on nutrition. And I feel like I have so many questions about them. I'm like, okay, but what were the other things they were eating? And like, was their food, like, how was their food growing? What was the soil quality? Was it organic? Like, there's like so many things. And so I completely agree. I think it's beautiful to see that it is emerging and there are these, really amazing studies out there. And, even more like, increasing ones on specifically nutrition for anxiety and like looking at gut health and all of that kind of stuff. But I think there is still this big gap where it's like, oh, we could have so many more studies and really dive into it.
And not to like overwhelm anyone listening with like all this like talk of clinical studies, but I think it's fairly simple for a lot of us to understand, like, how do you test a diet for anxiety if you don't also rule out, like, you have to be very careful what's the caffeine consumption, for example, which might technically fall outside of the study. Like, we might not take that into consideration and just look at the foods, and then it might skew the results. It might make it look like that diet change is not having such a big impact. It also depends, what was the diet like before they started changing it, how pro-inflammatory was it before, blood sugar all over the place, and how much has it changed since they made those changes. So I just think we need to understand that there is so much more to this than what might even be in the research. And we do have amazing research. It's just that I think there's the potential that it's potentially even more powerful than we can even actually get written down into scientific papers.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's so exciting what's possible there. So, okay, how did you, as you're learning it, because I know for me, it started with like almost going too far in the direction of like perfection with food as you learn about it. And then you learn like to the degree, I remember learning something about like when you brown foods, as in like when they go crispy and golden on the outside, they've become to some extent pro-inflammatory. They've become to some extent oxidized. And so technically this is not the healthiest, most wonderful health promoting form of that food. But like, can you imagine not having crispy golden potatoes in your life? Like,
Never.
so we can easily take it way, way too far. And that's not necessarily an unhealthy thing. So my question is, how did you find yourself implementing this in your own life as you were learning it? I'm sure it's very different now to how you work with people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I'm glad you brought that up because I think it was a challenge while I was in school, especially having a history of an eating disorder. And then you're learning, like, you can literally take any food, like, a banana, for example, and like be like, oh yeah, it's amazing, high in potassium, like all these things. And I'd be like, but for us, like in Canada, we can't grow bananas locally. So it's like they're picked green, they're shipped across the, two continents. And like, oh, they're really high in sugars and, whatever. I'm just using an example. It's not that I believe that, but so I think, yeah, for me, it was a challenge, and it was something that I really had to actively work through in school. And at the time too, I was seeing like a really amazing therapist. So like, I think there were just like so many modalities to really support it. But I think, the minute I kind of finished and graduated from school, I remember someone telling me this, they just kind of said, the important stuff that is like meant for you and for those that you're going to work with, it will stick with you. And the other stuff you kind of just like leave behind, like you said, where, you just like, you have to trust. And I think that's true too, for clients that are working with nutritionists. It's like, you might get a lot of information and be like, okay, how do I decipher what works, what doesn't? And again, it just kind of goes back to like, okay, what is true for me and like what feels doable? And it's such a fine line when we talk about nutrition for anxiety, as you've kind of alluded to, where it's like, how do you, really nourish your body and make sure your brain is getting all these nutrients and you're, not eating so much inflammatory foods and all of that, balancing that with enjoying life and enjoying making food social and fun and, all of these things. So I just want to encourage anyone listening. It's like, it absolutely can be done. And when I always just say, like, whenever it's feeling too much or overwhelming, or you're in that phase where, and this is what I had to do when I was in school, where it did feel a bit like, oh my gosh, like, what can I eat now? Just like take a step back and just remember, like, okay, I'm okay. And like, really just sit with it.
It's so easy to demonize foods. I remember getting really worried about the oxalates and that are in things like beetroot and green vegetable. I think spinach has them. So like they were like in a lot of really health promoting, nourishing foods. And they're technically known as anti-nutrients because they can bind to some of your minerals like iron and stop you from absorbing them. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, like, so I don't eat beetroot. And it's like, no, that's not the answer. As I said, easy to demonize any food. There's a negative for everything, even the vegetables, which I think are generally pretty, like most people agree, are good for us. But you can find a negative opinion or a negative skew or perspective on any kind of food. So I think at the end of the day, we do have to come above the like all the noise of it at some point and just say, you know what? Just eat like fresh, whole food. And that's a great starting point.
Amen. So, so true. I couldn't agree more. And I do tell people too, I think, yeah, whole foods is like the basis, I think, because, you know, that's what it has all the nutrients and is going to feed our brains and like is going to be not super inflammatory, you know, or it could be anti-inflammatory. And I think I also encourage people because I think it can be really stressful when you're starting to eat this new way. It can be, feeling like your kind of things are being taken away from you. It's like, oh, but I love my coffee and I love my dairy, but I know I'm allergic to it or whatever it might be. And so I think really looking at like, but what are you adding? And I think a lot of people don't realize that you actually get to add all of these amazing foods that you might not have had before when you're like looking to diversify your diet and to support your mental health with the food you eat. And I feel like I look at the way I used to eat and the way I eat now, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like how did I live without my like creamy cacao latte and like all of these exciting things that I get to enjoy now. So I think it's just like remembering there's like so much good that you get to add as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of what are some more crazy things that we could easily take too far, like in terms of those nitty-gritty nutrition concepts. Like, I think it might be biotin. Like, I'm really scraping the barrel of my nutrition studies here, but that is like one of the main sources of it is in egg yolks or something like that. And I think they have to be raw. So if you don't have like raw egg yolks in your diet or something, you don't get the biotin. I have to double check that. But
Okay.
yeah, but it's like, then it's like, oh my God, if I'm not having eggs every day, am I not getting this nutrient? Like, of course you're getting that nutrient somewhere because otherwise you'd be dead.
Absolutely. Totally. You know what? One that came to mind for me, which I think has a lot of talk recently is like the lectins in beans and things like that.
Yes, lectins are
Yeah.
huge. There's a guy who's like really into lectins. I've listened to some of his podcasts and he's got books that are like all about get all the grains out basically and all the beans. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like I'm like, no, they're so grounding. And it's like, I think it's just like also tuning into like, how do you feel? It's like, do you feel bad? You know, like, is this wrong for your body or right? Like, I know sometimes you have to like work on your gut health and all of that to really help. But I think it's like going back intuitively, it's like, these are whole foods and they're amazing for us. So like, let's start there.
And I was very confused too when I was studying about the grains, particularly because I was like, oh my God, hang on, this information in front of me is telling me these are really high in antioxidants and B vitamins that are really important for our energy levels. This sounds like it's actually really good for us. Why am I hearing all this stuff about, particularly I think in the like 2010 sort of to 2015 time, it was like paleo was such a big thing, right? And I think it still is, but it's become a little quieter, hopefully anyway. And so it's just like, wow, there's always another perspective. You can also prove that something you're eating is usually pretty good for you too.
Absolutely. It's so true.
Yeah. So, coming down to, I think I heard someone say recently, it's like there are no good foods or bad foods. There are just more nutritious foods or less nutritious foods. It's all just food. I think
So true.
that's so important. But yeah, rising above all the noise of nutrition, Megan, where would you sort of suggest someone start just from that perspective of like, okay, how do we block out all those like little tiny things that can get stuck in our head and make us anxious, like I'm doing it wrong, and actually just help us feel like, okay, it's not so overwhelming. I can just start and put these steps in and take these steps in the right direction.
Absolutely. So I think one of the best places to start, and this is what I encourage a lot, like all my clients to do. And what I did was really start focusing on blood sugar balance. So really looking at, okay, how can I keep my blood sugars balanced and stable throughout the day? And for those who don't know, blood sugar, like blood glucose levels, you really, of course they're going to oscillate a little bit, after you eat, they might go up, then they might go down. So I always like to describe it. It can be like waves in the ocean, but you don't want like peaks and valleys when it comes to your blood sugar. So I think one of the best places to start is really keeping your blood sugars as balanced as possible throughout the day, because that's going to avoid cortisol spikes and crashes and all of that kind of stuff. So I think I encourage people to do that by, eating the right mix of micro and macronutrients. So making sure you're getting some protein in your meals, some healthy fats, some complex carbohydrates. And then I like to say like half your plate loaded with, fresh veggies, or if it's breakfast and you want some fruit, whatever it might be. But I think blood sugar balance is a great place to start. And then the second one I would say is just looking into adding more whole foods, exactly like what you said, Georgie, where it's like, okay, if it's, it's a real whole food, let's eat it and enjoy it. And where are the areas that you can actually like maybe swap? It's like, if you love potato chips, which again, no shame in that, but it's like, how could you make some like delicious baked, like thin little potato chips in your oven and enjoy them with some like avocado or hummus or whatever it might be. And, really looking at ways that you can kind of add more whole foods into your diet. I think that those are kind of the two areas I would start with.
I've been making this really delicious thing lately, Megan. It's like thinly sliced sweet potato covered in olive oil and a bit of salt, and then just like baked in the oven. And then I add black beans on top and salsa and some fresh tomatoes and a little bit of cheese, which can be added or not, depending on whether you like it, how you react to it. And fresh avocado on top once that's all baked as well. And it is so yummy and so great for, like, we've got colors in there, there's fiber in there, there's protein, fats, like everything is ticked off. And then the phytochemicals as well, the different colors.
Yeah, that sounds delicious. I'm like, I'm hopping on a plane.
Yeah, I would send you some, but it would take quite a while. Do you have any favorite meals or dishes that you like to cook that we can just kind of like talk through like that and give some ideas to people? I know people just love food ideas and inspiration.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'd say the first one that comes to mind for me, I love, and this might sound boring to some people, my partner is always like, Megan, this is the most boring, like favorite meal you could have. But I'm like, no, you got to just make it the right way. So for me, I love looking at a delicious, I call them nourish bowls. So for me, it's like, okay, I love having quinoa as kind of the base with some chopped kale, and then any kind of protein of choice, whether that's like roasted chickpeas or tempeh or meat, like whatever, like great pasture raised meats. And then I would say for the healthy fats, I love making a tahini dressing. That's like my most favorite thing. So I'll put in like a little bit of maple syrup, tahini, lemon juice, salt, and it's delicious, so easy to make. And then, just adding tons of veggies. My absolute favorite food on this planet is like baked yams or baked sweet potatoes. So I always add those to my bowl. Then you can like kind of sprinkle on some hemp hearts on top or sesame seeds, add some chopped kale or romaine, and you just have this like delicious bowl. And I love it because it's so versatile. You can like, I'm like, don't even follow the recipe, just like pick the veggies you want, pick the protein, pick the carb, and like make the tahini sauce. And it's like such a delicious meal.
Sounds so delicious. And I don't know if, unless you're familiar with eating these kind of foods and having a bowl like that and how delicious like tahini dressing is, I don't think people can appreciate how good it is until you actually try it. And you're like, oh, because it's like, how can it, something that nourishing, that many colors in it, that much in it, be so tasty? We think, we kind of can be conditioned to think the only tasty foods are like your, Kentucky Fried Chicken and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, it's so true. Okay, I had a couple others come to mind. Now that you asked this question, I'm like,
Yes,
mine is.
I just feel like this is really fun.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so I would say another great one that I've been super into lately is wraps. So like there's a great wrap brand in Canada, but I mean that I kind of go to, but I'm sure there's amazing ones in Australia. So I will put in like hummus. I'll do again, just kind of like whatever veggies and I have in house. Like today I put in some shredded carrots, put in some cilantro, some chopped romaine. Sometimes I'll do like roasted chickpeas, or again, like whatever kind of protein you have in the house. The other day, my partner and I did ground bison, and we put that in.
Ground
And then,
bison.
yeah.
Oh my God, that could you get more like Canadian?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, maybe ground kangaroo. I don't know.
Yeah, we have kangaroo. We
Okay,
genuinely
there
do.
you go. Yeah, I realized as I was like saying that, I was like, I'm guessing this is probably not something you guys eat a lot of, but yeah, so like any kind of protein, and then I'll put in like a little dressing. Like there's a delicious kind of like store-bought salad dressing that I love the ingredients, so I'll put that in, and then I like fold it up. And I actually have a video on my website of like how I fold my wraps, because I feel like it's really hard for people. So like, fold it up, then I put it on like a cast iron pan, and like we'll fry it. And that's like just to kind of like get it nice and crispy. And that is definitely another favorite of mine.
Did you mention what kind of wrap you use?
So I just use like a whole wheat. The brand here is called like Indian Life, but I'm guessing you guys don't have that one. But they're delicious. They're yeah, just like whole wheat wraps that I'll use, and
Amazing.
really good.
Yeah, and the whole wheat, meaning you kind of got a bit more of those antioxidants. They haven't been as processed. You got some B vitamins in there extra versus like the white wheat, white wheat. Let's call it that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I like, I always say like, of course, so important to read the ingredient labels. And like these ones like don't have preservatives, and like you can be surprised, like looking at two different wraps. It's like one, the ingredient list can be like a mile long, and another one, it can just be like, okay, whole wheat flour, water, like, a little bit of oil or whatever it might be in it. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go with the one with limited ingredients. And yeah, I like to look for organic wheat products. And yeah, they're great.
Yeah, so important. And so what's your go-to like breakfast on a normal weekday?
Yes. Okay. I'm glad you asked, because that was the next meal that was coming to mind. So I'm a big fan of omelets. I love eggs. I think they've got so many great nutrients in them. And I just find that I've really been experimenting over the years with like sweet versus savory breakfast. And it used to be so hard for me to want to have a savory breakfast. I was all about like the oatmeal or like the pancakes or whatever it might be. But I've realized like when I have the savory breakfast, I just feel a lot more grounded and nourished. And there's of course some mornings where I might have like a bowl of oatmeal or something else more on the sweet side, but I do just love having a delicious omelet. And my favorite is super simple. I just like saute up some onion and some purple cabbage, and then I'll put that in my omelet. So it's like 2 ingredients, and then I kind of flip it and top it with some avocado. If I'm hungry, I'll have like a piece of toast on the side. But I love making like a big omelet, and then I'll always have some extra veggies on the side that I eat with it, and it's delicious.
Talk us through the addition of the purple cabbage, because I know like it's so delicious and good for you, but like what where are you thinking like onion and purple cabbage?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I mean, of course, like you kind of like alluded to with all of these like phytonutrients, like the purple is amazing. What a great addition in terms of just like color and all the nutrients that brings. And then cabbage, it's just like such a hearty vegetable. And I think it's amazing. It's something that I make a regular part of my diet. And I know it's for something that maybe people aren't like often like, go towards at the grocery store, but I always have a head of cabbage in our house. And green is great too, but there's just something beautiful about the purple, and yeah, loaded with nutrients.
Yeah, extra. I mean, purple, where else do we get purple in our diet? Usually I think it's only really red onion or blueberries.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we have purple sweet potatoes. I don't know if you guys have those.
Oh yeah, I think you've got to go to farmers markets to get them here.
Yeah, totally. But you're right. It's hard to find purple. So definitely eat up that purple cabbage.
And to think of them regularly as like a part of your diet. Like I think if it's just in your breakfast all ready to go, you don't even have to think about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so true.
I will share. I've been recently loving having oatmeal with hemp seeds and chia seeds to stabilize the blood sugar. Anyone listening? Because then we've got the protein and the fats there, but also and then I just love just frozen blueberries, and that's the whole thing. It's like so simple.
Amazing.
It tastes so delicious, and it's got that enough sweetness that it's tasty, but I don't find it like overpowering or like I feel like my blood sugar is going to go through the roof.
Yeah, amazing. And I love that one because it's like so quick to make, you know, like I think a bowl of oatmeal is like under 5 minutes and you're good.
Yeah, we're going into the colder weather here too. So I think it's super important to have a warmer breakfast than like in summertime. I'm probably more into my green smoothies and things like that.
Yeah, I agree that and I like that you brought up that point of like seasonality too, because I think our diet should change, you know, throughout the year. And it's something we've kind of had the privilege almost of not having to do just by our modern food system. But when you can just tap into those simple things, be like, oh yeah, okay, like it is winter time. I'm going to stop drinking the smoothie, or just like maybe not drinking it so cold, like don't put all the frozen berries in it and stuff. I think that really helps too. And especially for me, like it helps me to feel very grounded when I'm eating with the seasons, you know?
And even in traditional Chinese medicine, they talk about us having this digestive fire that we've got to keep stoked and we want to keep it warm and nourished. And you just think about like cooling your system down all the time with this like cold food is not a great thing. And when we're anxious, our blood flow is diverted away from our digestive system anyway. So we want to bring the blood flow back to that area, make it nice and warm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, let's just, while we're on the breakfast topic, how do you feel about breakfast for people? What if someone says to you, I just don't like breakfast, or I'm fasting? I like fasting.
Ooh,
Let's go to those two.
I love it. Okay, perfect. So I am a big breakfast fan. I think it's very important. And I often, you know, will use myself as a case study. I notice so much on the mornings that I like don't eat breakfast, or like I did try intermittent fasting. We'll go there, but like I really noticed feeling pretty anxious by the afternoon, or I noticed that like by the time lunch came out around, if I didn't have a good breakfast, I was so hungry at lunchtime that like I felt like uncontrollably hungry. And then the minute I ate, I felt like I was like, whoa, I am so full. Like I felt like my metabolism is just not going. And I know from so many nutrition clients that I work with, I do encourage them to get on breakfast, and the reviews are amazing. Like I think it takes some convincing. And I always say that I'm like, I know people have such a love-hate relationship with breakfast, but if you can give it a try and just get in something small, like I always say, if you know, like a big bowl of oatmeal or an omelet is just like completely out of reach, even going for like a banana with some nut butter and some like hemp hearts or whatever it might be, just like get something in your system and work your way up. I think it's very, very important. And like I was saying kind of at the beginning, it's like breakfast is another opportunity to like get to nourish our bodies and give our minds what they need as well. So I think it's really important, especially for blood sugar balance, for, you know, feeling of anxiety. I really, really encourage people to get that breakfast in. I'm interested to hear what you say about fasting, Georgie, but for me personally, I think if you are prone to anxiety, intermittent fasting is not the way to go. I think that, you know, eating these, at least kind of those 3 balanced meals throughout the day, getting in those nutrients, that is something that I would way rather see. And again, it's like, I think also just for creating that healthy relationship with food, once we put these really rigid eating hours on our schedule, and then you wake up one morning and you're like super hungry, but you're like, nope, I can't, I'm fasting. And then you like, if you did break it, you kind of feel like you're cheating or you're letting yourself down, when like all you're really doing is like listening to your body and what it needs. And especially for women throughout our hormonal cycles, or those who menstruate, like it really is important. And our bodies have different caloric needs throughout the month and different energetic needs. And I would say for women, like it's really not a good idea. And a lot of the studies have been done on men, you know, for intermittent fasting. So I think it's something that I personally just encourage people to kind of look at too, like, why are you drawn to intermittent fasting? Because I think there's, you know, ways around it. I do see fasting, like I know it can be beneficial, and I'm not like belittling all of the amazing science and benefits of that. I just think if we're strictly speaking about anxiety and that kind of feeling, I think it's something that it's like really focus on those main meals and put intermittent fasting on the back burner. So I'd love to hear what you think though.
You literally took the words out of my mouth, Megan, with the fasting. I mean, I agree. The studies are mostly done on men because it's much easier to study men. Going back to our scientific study critique earlier, much easier to study men. Their bodies are the same day in, day out. They don't have these hormonal fluctuations that we do as women, where we're cyclical and we do have different needs at different times of the month. So it's a lot easier to study men and to study them over long periods of time and see the effects. And so fasting, we know that it can potentially make women lose their periods, lose their cycle. Anything that does that, not so good. So particularly for women who are in their menstruating years, I would say eat your breakfast. Do not fast majority of the time. And particularly when we are highly stressed and anxious, you can sometimes not feel hungry, but that's because of the anxiety. It's not because your body's not hungry. And so your brain is still needing that nutrition, needing that food, perhaps even more than a normal day, because it's under a lot of stress. And when you send that food into your system, you send glucose to your brain, you calm your brain, you can think clearly. So it's so important. And I couldn't agree more. At least experimenting with how you feel having breakfast if you aren't a breakfast person. And I'm actually happy when I'm hungry for breakfast. When I wake up and within half an hour of waking, I'm hungry for breakfast, I know my nervous system is relaxed. My nervous system is calm. I'm ready for food. And so it's actually a really positive thing to be hungry in the morning.
Absolutely. I agree. I think there's like nothing better than like waking up and being like, ooh, I can't wait for what I'm going to have for breakfast. And it's such a good sign, like you said, for your nervous system and for your gut health. And like, I think we should wake up hungry and ready to nourish our bodies, or not wake up too hungry, but like wake up, like think like having food be something that we're, making a part of our routine is great and important.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm so glad we cleared that up. Now, go-to snacks, like you're hungry or you're like out for the day and you've got to keep something with you in your handbag or in the car, or maybe it's just like you've gotten home and it's not quite dinner time, but you need to eat because you can feel your blood sugar dropping. You feel that foggy, fatigue, slightly anxious feeling that we can feel when we get a blood sugar drop. What are your go-tos, Megan?
Okay, great question. I feel so for me, I love baking. So I'm a huge baker. So I love kind of making all of these healthified recipes. Like I've got a great recipe for protein balls or granola bars. I'm actually looking at like a plate of brownies that I just made that are like kind of like healthified. They're made with sunflower seed flour and almond butter and like a little bit of maple syrup and raw cacao. So I love, if there's a chance that I can get in like one of my like sweet little treats, I will definitely do that. But I know it does take a bit of time to bake. A few of my other favorite snacks, I love just a good old apple with peanut butter or almond butter. And again, there you have like the complex carbohydrate from the fruit, and then you've got the healthy fats from the nut butter. I'll put a little bit of cinnamon on for extra goodness. So that's definitely
it tastes like cookies.
Go to.
People don't realize
Yeah.
that nut butter with cinnamon tastes like cookies.
Absolutely. It's such a great combo. And then I feel like all of these are so generic. I hope not, but
they're great.
Maybe just because I talk about these all day. But I would say I love like carrots and hummus. That's another great one. I love making my own hummus and just like having a jar of that in the fridge. And it's amazing what kind of snacks you come up with when you have something prepped in your fridge. Like if you have that jar of hummus prepped in your fridge, or sometimes I'll even have like a jar of like roasted veggies that I had from like, leftover from the night before. And like, I'm like really hungry. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like perfect. I'll just eat some of these like roasted veggies. And it tastes like decadent and delicious. So I think like having that one extra step of prep can be really helpful.
Yeah.
What are some of my other favorite snacks? Like hard-boiled eggs are such good ones. Just, quick protein, quick energy. I think those are great.
Yeah.
What about you?
I love, like, even it sounds so weird, but getting half an avocado and just like squeezing on some lemon and a pinch of salt. And like, if I've got nothing else and I just want to eat something, that's such a nourishing, yummy snack. What else have I been loving lately? There's this brand in Australia called Lukaku. They do all these amazing collagen-based protein powders, but they've got all these products too. And one of the ones, and I'm not endorsing them, by the way, so they're not a sponsor of the podcast, but they've got these hazelnut chocolate bars, and they are so delicious, and I love them. So that's something I will have as well. Or maybe, some Greek yogurt with a little bit of honey and some cinnamon.
Yeah, nice. That's such a good one. I love that. Those chocolate bars sound lovely. I will have to try one if I ever come to Australia.
Well, it's the way to get that sort of food in without, needing to spend the time processing and making the balls and things yourself. However, on that note, because you mentioned, not everyone has the time for this, and I also know, but for me, I'm curious your perspective on this. For me, it's always been one of those things that when I'm setting the time aside to make some delicious chocolatey balls or brownies out of nuts and seeds and all those things, it's really quite soul nourishing. I use that as switch off time. I use that as creative time. It's not hard work. It's not me like, it doesn't feel the same as, needing to clean the house and do laundry. For me, it feels like fun. It feels like creativity to be able to combine that food together and really celebrate food and bring that love into food. And so when you put it that way, it's kind of like it's an additional fun thing in your life versus it being another task you have to do that's going to drain you of time. How do you feel about it, Megan?
Oh, okay. I feel like for that one, you stole the words from my mouth. Like, I completely agree, where it's just like, I think, yeah, it is fun. And I think I love that you said creativity, because for me, I've never really connected with my artistic side, I would say, until I was like older and like started baking and cooking and creating recipes. And I realized like, wow, like this is my art and this is my creativity. It's like coming up with a beautiful recipe or following a beautiful recipe and like getting to eat something delicious. So I think that is beautiful. And I think it's like, it kind of goes back to this idea, like evolutionarily speaking, like we as humans, we're designed to like survive, and like eating is one of the things. And I think it's just kind of like, it is within us to want to like nourish our bodies and take this time. It's like, it's actually very important and kind of just like primal instinct to have to, prepare our food. And I think we've just like lost touch with that because we can get everything from the store and we don't need to. But when you do kind of tap into that and like let yourself enjoy it, you realize like, wow, this is actually really fun. And it can be cool, and the stuff you make at home is going to taste probably way better. I sometimes it takes practice. I've made some things that taste awful, but for the most part, it tastes way better when you make it at home and you got to enjoy it. So,
And even that's fun, like the process of failing and like burning something or, just like tasting something and being like, oh, I really missed the ratio. Like I put way too much like salt in that one or something, It's or maybe this doesn't work.
Totally.
Like maybe this doesn't work with mung beans or whatever the weird ingredient you wanted to try and hide in there. That can be fun as well. And I know so many women who listen to this podcast are busy moms or busy women in general, but there's this idea of I just want to be more present with my family, with my kids, because I'm so elsewhere all the time up in my head. I can't think of a better way to spend that time with your kids, with your family, than doing an activity together that also is productive, also like preparing yummy, healthy, nourishing food for the family. But why not make some bliss balls together? Get your kids rolling them.
Yes, totally. Yeah, it's such a good point. It's actually like I have two nieces and a nephew, or a niece and a nephew, and it's like always my go-to thing. Like when we're hanging out, I'm always like, oh, like do you want to bake cookies? And like they get so excited, and it's so fun, and it really is such a special use of time. And I think for myself too, some of my fondest memories growing up was like when we'd get home from school, and then the night when my mom would be like, let's bake cookies, and we would love it. It's really beautiful.
And you can bake cookies and you can bake them like, with just a few extra ingredients that like you could do like traditional cookies, right? But you could just, instead of the white sugar that's just like super shoots up the blood sugar, you could use coconut sugar. Like you can switch some things out so you can still have those foods, enjoy them, but you can do little changes that still taste exactly the same, but so much more. There's the less nutritious or the more nutritious, and that's it.
Exactly. It's so true. And I think baking, especially for me, like I've had to kind of work and be very creative, because my partner, he is very particular on, like, he used to be like, oh, there's no way I'm not eating something with white flour in it or whatever. And like slowly over time, like now I'll like make him like the like white flour stuff, and he'll be like, oh, I actually like those other cookies better that you use like hazelnut flour in or oat flour. And it's like, it's really cool. You can kind of like, you know, train your taste buds, but also like there's so many amazing recipes out there that have like oat flour in them. And like you said, raw like coconut sugar and maple syrup and honey. And it really is cool. We live in such a beautiful time where like we're all like exploring with these, you know, more nutritious ingredients, and I guarantee there's something out there for everyone that they will love.
I agree. And sometimes it's fun to like just give them the like more nutritious version anyway and see if they can notice, and often they can't.
Yes, it's so true, unless you're my family.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I swear my family is just like, they're always hardest on you, you know?
Yeah, I've got those people around me too. Whenever I stay with my grandpa and I make a like green smoothie, he's like, what is this green stuff you're making? Like I could never fool him.
Yeah, I know. There's a few that just can't be fooled.
Oh, Megan, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you and exploring food. And I'm like, I love just exchanging ideas around food, because that honestly, I think is the best way for people versus giving them like a bunch of recipes and like all more work to do. It's like, just get creative and let the ideas and inspiration flow for you. So I hope everyone listening has had some inspired moments just hearing us talk about food. And Megan, tell me, for those who are listening and interested to find out more about you and keep in touch, where can they find you?
Absolutely. So 2 great places to find me. One would be on Instagram. My Instagram is megdejong.nutrition, and Deyoung is with a J. And then also my website. And I do have actually lots of delicious, healthy recipes up there. And my website is megdejongnutrition.com. And yeah, two great places to find me.
I'm sure everyone's going to be running to that website to go find your recipes, Meg. Thank you so much, lovely. I'll make sure all that information's in the show notes so everyone can find you nice and easily. It's been so much fun talking about food.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Georgie. And thanks to
you.
everyone for listening.
Thank you, Meg.
If you're ready for the deep dive into this work to master your anxious mind, I invite you to join the Anxiety Reset program. Over 90 days, I'll be guiding you on how to build your mental resilience, reprogram those limiting beliefs that keep you stuck in self-doubt, heal your gut, balance your hormones, nourish your mind, body, and soul. Using a combined approach of naturopathy, nutrition, hypnotherapy, and live group coaching with me, you'll feel supported and motivated to show up for yourself consistently, day after day. And this is how you will experience extraordinary results. You can master your anxious mind. The best time to begin is right now. Let's do it together. You'll find the link to learn more in the show notes. Thank you for listening. We have reached the end of this episode. If you enjoy this podcast and you find it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would hit subscribe or share this episode on your Instagram stories, and make sure you tag @Georgie the Naturopath. But that is all for today. Please be kind to yourselves. Know that you are enough and you are exactly where you need to be.